Those bumblebees just showing up after we build this location for them, right? We provide them with food and all of a sudden they're there. It's not like with humans where you have to market and advertise and you gotta break your back trying to get people to know these things are available to you. With insects and with most animals in nature, just it happens. It happens on its own, and that makes me really excited for the future, because I figure if at all 4 gardens we've had insects investigating and nectaring within 24 hours, well, imagine what we could do with all the rest of the spaces on the planet if we provide what is needed for the little guys that are running the world.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the show where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today I'm coming to you from Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. My guest today is Willa Soroka. Willa is a project implementation specialist at New Hampshire Audubon, and we talk about a bunch of different stuff. We talk about finding your spark for caring about nature, wildlife, and the outdoors. We talk about conservation success stories across the Granite State. We talk about educating kids and helping them find the beauty in themselves and in nature. And we seem, for some reason, to talk about gorillas a lot, and it's probably my fault. We cover all that and a bunch of other stuff on this episode of Granite Goodness. I hope you enjoy it. Willa Soroka.
You said it wrong already.
Yeah.
Let's restart this one, Andy.
Willa Sorokis.
No, I am not a dinosaur.
William Crocus.
Close. I do like flowers.
William Shakespeare. Welcome to Granite Goodness. I am so glad that you're here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I don't know. You said that you kind of got roped into it.
Thank you, Diana.
Yeah.
You know who you are.
Well, this is a very exciting episode for me because, you know, we do our little newsletter, the Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, and at the end of every one of these episodes, like I plug it, I say, hey, if you want to know what's good news and happening in New Hampshire, check out this thing. And if you have any good story tips, I say that. I say, reach out to me at hello@granitegoodness.com or whatever. And someone actually did it. Like I've done 10 of these newsletters now, and I think before I did number 7, which was like a month ago, your coworker reached out to me.
Right on.
And she said, I have some great stories from New Hampshire Audubon about, bald eagles and peregrines. Yeah. We just did our seasonal birth counting or whatever. And that just that made me so happy. You have no idea. Because I know people read it, but this is a new baby as you said it. And my mom listens to these and she's great. And I know she reads my newsletter. But the fact that I knew someone else listened to it and did it enough, and they actually reached out with some good news, made me very happy. And then I think you were the one who got press ganged into,
Sure did.
Oh, well, I've actually wanted to talk to New Hampshire Audubon for a while, so
super.
It ended up being you. Sorry.
Okay, no, I'm excited for it. I said before, I'm a little nervous. It's a little intimidating, have the big microphone in your face, but no. I'm here to support and represent New Hampshire to a degree, and New Hampshire Audubon for sure.
Perfect. Well, I think you're already a good guest in my view because, and again, I've loved all the people who've come on here, but sometimes when you get to talking to people, you can tell when they have too much media training, Yeah,
I've got none, so here we are.
Perfect.
I'm too afraid to even look left knowing the camera is there.
Oh, you don't
just
need to.
Yeah, no, I don't want to. I don't just gonna pretend it's not there. My comfort zone here at the bar, so we're good.
That's right. You're in your happy place.
Yes.
Well, I want to dig into that, So usually I like to open these. Willa, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with New Hampshire? You from here?
I am,
you live around here?
I am a New Hampshire native, born and raised in New Hampshire. Grew up in the Hudson area, so the Benson Park references back in the day. If you guys are anyone listening from Hudson, you will know 100% what that is. And then...
Wait, what is that? I want to know.
The Benson's Park. So Benson's Park used to be 100 years ago a zoo of sorts. So you could go and see a giant gorilla who was in a cage that was way too small for him, but at the time we didn't understand animal welfare. And as a kid, that was probably one of my earliest interactions with wildlife.
Yeah.
Granted, it was through bars, but at the time when you're 2 and 3, I don't think you understand those concepts.
Right.
So that's Hudson in a nutshell for me. Was my memories there was Benson's Park and being able to go out and see the animals, and here I am working to conserve animals. So
Right.
was there a connection? Maybe.
Yeah.
Is it memories I can remember? Absolutely not. But I have photo evidence that shows that I was in fact there.
I don't know. You remember the gorilla?
I do. Well, I still have a deep-seated fear of gorillas. Maybe
Really?
it's their proximity to humanity.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right. You're not going to like the second half of this episode.
Oh, good. Oh, looking forward
We
to that.
actually keep a gorilla.
In the bar?
Yeah, just
Super.
He's right under there.
My heart rate just went up. I'm sweating profusely now. Thank you for that, Andy.
He's 100. He's 100. Oh wait, you said 100 years ago there was a gorilla. I was having it in my head. I was like, you were there?
By the way, I am a wizard. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't believe in progressing with age. No, so grew up in Hudson, and then I have stayed in New Hampshire pretty much ever since. I've done a lot of traveling. I've explored lots of different locations in the world. And I always end up coming back home.
Yeah.
And home is where the heart is, and my heart is definitely here in the Granite State.
Yeah, love that. Did you ever think of living somewhere else?
Yeah, I tried like 100 different locations. Yeah, I had full intentions of living in Colorado and Virginia and Washington State and South America for a bit. And
Yeah.
every couple of months, I started aching to be back. And I didn't understand that that was called homesick
Right.
until just this past year,
Oh.
where I had this unique, deep-rooted ache in my heart, right in that hollow between where
Yeah.
your ribs meet.
I know that spot.
Yeah, and it was a new one. I was like, am I dying? Is there something wrong here? I'm like, gosh, it just like, it aches, it hurts. It felt like it needed to be cradled.
Yeah.
And I realized it was aching for home. And home, for the first time, I had a home. I've always been seeking different locations to live around the globe. And
Yeah.
as it turns out, it's New Hampshire. And I think as a young person growing up in New Hampshire, we think it's so small and it's not super culturally diverse.
Right.
So I want to see all the things, and I want to be somewhere more exciting, more inclusive, more unique. And at the end of the day, it's New Hampshire does fit all of those needs for some of us. And for me in particular, this is exactly where I would like to be. I still need to travel because I need to see it all, but I know that this is my home. And so it's nice to know there's a place to come back to, especially when the heart starts hurting.
Yeah. Man, you said that you don't do this and that you're not like good at it. You're saying all the things that I try and get people to say
Right on.
without any prompting. I mean, that's like a joke, but really, a couple episodes ago, I had Will Stort on. He runs the organization now called Leadership New Hampshire, but before that, he did Stay Work Play.
Oh, yes, I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. He ran Stay Work Play for a while, and he told me about all this stuff because he kind of has the macro view of that pathway that you just described, and it's unique to everybody. Like I went through a similar thing, and I think so do many people from New Hampshire, who are kind of the millennial age, where we have more exposure
Yes.
to like what
else is out
on.
there.
Yeah, and there's a draw for all these things, but there's an earnestness and a homesickness, that I think draws people back.
Yeah.
And he said that is borne out in the data. He's like, yeah, people, they get to their late 20s if they've been living somewhere else. There's even a term he calls them boomerangers.
The boomerangers.
Yeah, the boomerangs.
I could relate to that.
Yeah. But anyway, so you're not alone
Yeah,
in your
no, not at all.
in your New Hampshire journey, but yours is very unique. Because I don't know that many of us feel the draw of the gorilla.
Oh God,
When we-
I'm gonna regret saying that.
When we leave, it's those. Then I'm going to reveal how educated I am about habitats and ecology. It's those native New Hampshire gorillas
Yes, indeed.
that are drawing you back here. The famous
Oh,
granite
gosh.
back.
I should have started with the red eft, which is our spotted salamander in its younger stage. They're
Okay.
much more cute, adorable, and they are in fact native.
Okay.
But here we are talking about gorillas.
Yeah. No. Listen, we could talk about gorillas. I actually, again, I don't have a career in wildlife conservation, but I do work in like his sustainability adjacent, and that's kind of like a through line for my life. But I was always very interested in orangutans.
My granddad was really interested in orangutans. Did you want to elaborate on that?
No, I was
okay.
I was considering, you said you're a time traveler, like maybe in another timeline, like I'm a version of your grandfather. I don't know.
I don't either. You guys do have similar colored eyes. He's a very stoic individual and very deeply invested in pharmaceuticals, actually. So he had that chemical element, and he was in the science field. I was never a science field person, ever. I have my bachelor's degree in fine arts, and my entire life was writing and reading and disappearing into the pages of books.
Yeah.
But I also spent endless opportunities exploring nature, but never put that under the umbrella of science my entire life until I was teaching as a kindergarten teacher and bringing tons of nature into the classroom and had to fit it into the Common Core standards. I said, how can I fit nature?
Right.
Nature's such a presence that doesn't fall into one category. You learn math in nature, you learn science in nature, you learn literacy, you learn words, your vocabulary is extended beyond belief when you start learning the scientific names of species as well as their common names and descriptive words.
Right.
And all of a sudden it was, oh gosh, I think what I'm trying to do is science.
Right.
And I was able to develop my curriculum so that it fit all those Common Core standards by putting all of my nature elements into science, which was against everything I'd ever learned in life, which was you are an artist.
Right.
You are a writer. You are not a scientist. And then I said, you know what? I'm not a scientist, but I'm a science educator. And that is how I ended up, long story short, at New Hampshire Audubon, because I went to school for my MS, which still I find laughable because I will not say that I'm a scientist, because I'm not a scientist. I'm just a science enthusiast and a nature girl.
Well, sometimes they say this to guests, but it's actually more true for you than any of the other people I've talked to. You are a Renaissance.
Oh.
You are a Da Vinci person. I'm not even kidding. Well, because this is the beauty of like Leonardo's worldview, is that no one, like exactly how you just described. He had all these interests, anatomy, biology, chemistry, art, every kind of art you can think of, architecture, and he would just do all these things. And no one ever explained to him that they were supposed to be distinct categories, that art and math and, the observation of the natural world were not supposed to be the same discipline, he just saw it all as the same enchilada.
It's so enchilada.
Very much in the way that you do,
or
it
in
was
the way super interconnected. And the only reason I started defining it differently was because we needed to in order to hit the criteria that permitted us to teach.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is backwards.
Right.
We should be able to experience everything as an amoeba's flow.
Yeah.
Why aren't we? And so I stopped working in kindergarten and went into the non-formal educational element, which originally transitioned into landscaping because I couldn't find a job.
Yeah.
And then has transitioned into New Hampshire Audubon. And I'm so grateful because I feel like I've found my niche.
Yeah. It's well, what do they say? You can't connect the dots, looking forward, right? You can only do it looking backward.
Yes. It's
funny.
been a constellation of sorts.
That's right. Yeah. Well, what a beautiful way to put it. My brother's girlfriend, kind of similar, she's like a landscape architect now, and she keeps asking me to come on the show. I don't know. She lives in Massachusetts, but she's from New Hampshire, so we'll see.
Yeah. She's got the roots here.
It's like how much...
Maybe she'll boomerang back too.
Right. Do I want to bend, the New Hampshire thing? We'll see. But she studied art. She was like a trained artist, went to Keene State, and then, worked as a landscaper, and now, similar, like, uses kind of her artistic vision and, her passion for design to design, gardens and ornamental gardens for people. So there's a connection there.
There is. And I think it's really unique because so many times, as someone in my 20s, originally, young and dumb, didn't realize
hey,
that what I was doing
for the next 6 months. So.
I think I'm going to be young and dumb forever, and I'm really grateful for it. But I was especially dumb and young in my 20s. And I'd get kind of bitter about doing these seemingly menial jobs, with landscaping or working at a bar. And it turns out that every single thing that we do in life, we end up taking, it might be a minute element of it, but you do end up using it.
Yeah.
So here at New Hampshire Audubon, my whole background during COVID, working at a landscaping location and doing hardscaping and breaking my back and breaking my nails and breaking everything, but creating beauty was how it helps me get through. And go figure, I'm now working in landscaping for New Hampshire Audubon under a completely different hat.
Yeah.
We're installing pollinator gardens in downtown Manchester.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't understand how to even begin to do this had I not spent all of those COVID years
Right.
landscaping. So it's one of those things where at the time I was like, oh, this is so silly. It's just wasting time and hurting my body. And yes, it hurt my body for a period, but it also made me a lot stronger and a lot more focused. So now I know how to do the design, how to do the implementation, and how to network with all of the different companies in order to acquire and procure the plants and the materials and make it happen.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful because at the time, I was cranky about it. Now I'm like, see, all of these things for a reason.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very artistic thing to do. It's
Perhaps.
and it's an artist's approach, to kind of transfigure an experience that many people might characterize as useless, right? And to say, I can draw on things
Yeah.
from that
Yeah.
and apply them here
Yeah.
in a way that's new and novel and creative for me.
And I don't want to put down the landscaping community at all in any
No, yeah, it's
fashion.
hard
Just for
work,
me,
yeah.
oh my God, it's the hardest work ever.
Right.
The hardest work ever, like unreal. But for me, it just wasn't what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I just kept thinking like, oh my gosh, I just got my master's degree. I'm still paying off this degree.
Right.
And here I am, mowing lawns and designing gardens. And it just didn't seem like it was what I should be doing.
Yeah.
But apparently it was.
Right.
Because now I'm using those skills today.
Yeah, it was the right thing at the time. That's a thing that, again, I'm almost 30 years old, so there's plenty of times where I have the opportunity or the relationship to mentor someone a little younger now.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing, like, again, if I'd talked to myself when I was younger, like at 18, I don't think I would have listened like you, dumb and dumb.
Young and dumb.
Young and dumb. The further back you go, the younger and dumber.
Stubborn and independent too, I would add.
Right.
I don't know if that applies to you, but
Oh,
I was definitely, I can
100%.
do it myself.
Yeah. I would have been like, hey, here's all these things that can save you time and effort. And I'd be like, no, I'm
Yep.
still gonna
Yep.
I'm still gonna bang
I need
my
to
head
do it
against
my
the
way.
wall. Yeah. But it's still fun to try.
It is. And it's a life lesson.
Yeah. And there are young people who do listen, and the thing that I wished I understood sooner was everything that you were saying is that, like, hey, the paths that people end up taking, like, they are so strange and unpredictable, but in the end they make sense for them. And it always happens in ways that you cannot foresee. And if you're just like, I don't know, you're doing the thing that you feel like you want to be doing, or you have a direction, like, just go and talk to people you think are interesting, orient towards things you think are interesting, and, like, stuff will connect for you in really cool ways. So I really like your story.
Right on. It's a good one. I'm very, very grateful for all of my experiences.
So let's dig into, we could have this whole episode just talking about, like, your experience as a kindergarten teacher. It's all going to connect though. Like,
It does.
We're going to go
Yeah,
dart
it
and
does.
back. And there's no like railroad for how I try and do these.
Cool.
We usually just, like, talk. But talk to me a bit, what you do at New Hampshire Audubon.
Sure.
Maybe I share a little bit in the beginning of like who you are and, what you do and, what your work does. But in your own words, what's New Hampshire Audubon? What's Audubon? What even is an Audubon? I thought it was a highway in Germany.
Yeah.
Why do we have one in New Hampshire? Are there gorillas on it? What is your role?
Okay.
When did you start directing traffic for gorillas on New Hampshire highways? Speaking in German only. Tell me about that.
Okay, here we go.
How did that all happen?
I'm going to just ignore all of the latter components of that, but New Hampshire Audubon is important to recognize that it is not Autobahn, right? It is Audubon, and it is named after John James Audubon, who is a very, very, very old and dead naturalist who has not the greatest history, as we are learning more and more about
Sure.
everything in life
Yeah.
and the past, and attempting to not repeat it and to remedy some of those problems. But we are still referred to as New Hampshire Audubon, which is not to be confused with National Audubon. We have some private entities throughout the country where we are separate and independent.
Yeah.
And so New Hampshire Audubon is only covering the things that are occurring here in New Hampshire.
Right.
That's birds, but it's also wildlife. And we have 4 different pillars of of interest, I guess you could say. We are very much invested in conservation and the biology behind it. It's all science-based, evidence-based. We have a team of amazing biologists, people that have been working towards phenomenal causes their entire careers and honestly have been with New Hampshire Audubon for, we're talking 50 years.
Wow.
Some of these people, and they are just
That's a lot of knowledge.
phenomenal. So much knowledge. Yeah. You can just feel it emanating off of them. They're
it's
amazing.
Their aura.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Carol Foss, I'm looking and thinking of you, and Pam Hunt and Chris Martin and Diane DeLuca, Becky Swamala, who congratulations just retired, but is not going to be gone. Yeah. Oh my gosh. They're just so passionate and so invested and so intelligent. And that is my favorite part of working at New Hampshire Audubon, is being able to be surrounded by people who, for my life, have been my mentors, my heroes. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I work with them. These are my coworkers. Yeah. I'm so humbled.
You're a peer.
Yeah, it's really unique. And I'm down here, but they're up here. But we're in this together. I love that.
I bet they wouldn't
I'm
say
still
that
learning.
about you.
They're still learning, I'm sure, but they have so much knowledge to share, and they share it so willingly. So there's the biology and conservation element. There's the policy element where we're hoping to put some sound judgment into place. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's the education, which is where I definitely fall into my particular realm. So again, we are independent from National Audubon, so our members can come from anywhere in the world, but our focus is here in the Granite State, from the Franconia Ridge area way the heck up north where we're monitoring rusty blackbirds, to the seacoast and over to the White River Junction area where we've got the rivers coursing through and creating habitat for our bald eagles.
And so you're an educator.
I would consider myself an educator. My title here is Project Implementation Specialist, which is just a big fancy word for when we get money from different grants, I execute the projects. And almost all of the projects for me
awesome,
are education.
Yeah.
At some point in time, they simmer down to education.
Sure.
So one of the big projects we've been working on recently was funded by the Moose Conservation License Plates. So if you've ever driven around and you see those moose, hey, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for supporting my project. Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
I always wonder
that's where
what
the funds are coming to
money.
it. A lot of people do. So anyone who's listening, if you have a moose plate, thank you. Because your funding has assisted with the creation of 4 pollinator gardens in downtown Manchester.
Wait, that's seriously cool.
Mm-hmm. And they're open to the public.
Oh,
they're not on private land. They are available for you and us and anyone to come and visit. And right now it's just the gardens, which are grand and worth the visit. Yeah. I'll tell you where they are in a moment. But also in the future, there are going to be opportunities for learning points. We're going to have kiosks. We'll have rotating centers. We'll have ways for learning and engaging with the garden. So it's not just an ornamental, ooh, this is pretty. It's, hey, this is who I'm seeing here. This is the plant that has biologically evolved with a specific insect that's native to this region. Whoa. And without that plant, we wouldn't have this insect. And without this insect, we wouldn't have this plant. And it's some pretty wild stuff. And how does that kind of stem into birds? Because that is what New Hampshire Audubon was originally designed around.
Sure.
Well, without those insects, we wouldn't have these birds, right? So it's all looking into the broader picture of things, that whole conservation web, the food web, rather than just the how can we save this one species? It's impossible. You have to save a bunch of species in order for all of them to thrive.
Yeah.
So the locations for the pollinator gardens, in case anyone listening wants to take a peek, we have our first one over at Beach Street Elementary School. We have our second one at the Manchester City Library. Our third one went in at Mill number 3, which is home to Girls at Work, the Sea Science Center, and the Historic Millyard Museum. And then our fourth one just went in over at Bakersville Elementary. So these 4 were completely funded by the Moose Plate Conservation License Plates, which is really exciting. I think I just said that wrong, but it's the Moose Plates. That's how we refer to it. It's like this big, huge New Hampshire Conservation something.
Right.
But all of us know it as the Moose Plate grant.
You know the plate.
Yeah, you know the plate.
There's not another one.
Exactly.
Man, every time I drive through there now, I'm gonna stop people on the street and say, "Did you know? Do you know who you're talking to?"
Yes, I help support these gardens. And it's not just the gardens, right? You should see the insects that are there within 24 hours of us installing these plants. It's like magic.
That fast?
Honest to goodness, I don't understand it. It's magic. We finish planting, or while we're planting, and we're talking downtown Manchester, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of concrete, there's a lot of people. And then it's not to say it's compared to Chicago or Boston, but in the same breath, these flowers have never existed here. There wasn't a pollen or nectar source, and all of a sudden, as we are putting these plants into the ground, and by we, I mean the volunteers that have come out of the woodwork to assist with these projects, and a lot of students that we've kind of wrangled in, while they're carrying the plants to their new home, the bumblebees are coming out and dropping in and saying hello. And it's unbelievable. It's really, really miraculous. It's really emphasizes that phrase, if you build it, they will come.
Well, I feel like there's kind of a mirroring of like the volunteers materialize.
They do.
Miraculously.
They do.
Out of the goodness of their hearts. And so too, the bees the volunteers get things and the bees get things too, but I don't know. That's just like a random thought that occurred to me. That's really awesome.
It's really cool. It really genuinely is cool. This is one of my favorite projects. Every project I get to do with New Hampshire Audubon has brought me so much joy.
Yeah.
And when this one came up, to be perfectly honest, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm done landscaping.
Right.
I'm not supposed to be doing the landscape
I can't be doing
thing.
that.
And honestly, not for nothing, I don't really like insects that much. So when that came up, I was like, well, this has nothing to do with birds. And then I started doing research. And
Right.
oh my gosh, now I'm absolutely enamored by these little creepy crawlies. I find them fascinating. We're doing high fives at the bumblebees. Did you know that? Reach out to a bumblebee while she's working and she goes to push you away.
Really?
Looks like she's giving you a high five.
Boom.
Yep, little fist bump and off you get. It's amazing. And they come in so many different sizes and shapes and colors. I didn't know that bees could be neon green. I had no idea. I didn't know that some wasps are metallic blue. And here we are out there with my volunteers and with our students, and we're all on the ground with our eyes and faces as close to the flowers as to this microphone, just examining these busy workers who have no interest in harming us because they've got a task to do.
Right.
And it's amazing. We're removing that fear of insects, which is just as important as conserving them.
This is you may not know this, but in another life, I used to be a professional beekeeper.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of the bee kind of education you're talking about, you know a lot more about it than I did.
I had to learn.
You had to learn, but no, it's a fun thing, So I was working with honeybees, of course, and a lot of people, they don't even understand. They think that all bees are honeybees, or that all bees, can sting you,
Yes.
et cetera, et cetera, and it's just a wonderful world. Like they're everywhere.
They're everywhere, and they're so critical to us.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about the honeybee, and the honeybees are great. I love honey. I have honey in my coffee every morning.
Right.
Those honeybees are not native to North America.
Yes.
Right? They came over across the ocean with our predecessors. The native bees who aren't producing honey are doing something that I think is even more of a service. They are helping to pollinate the crops that we rely on.
And they really need help.
And they genuinely need help.
Yeah.
I always think about the lack of biodiversity were we to start losing our native bees. And it's not just in the insect realm or the mammal realm or the bird realm, it's the plant realm. All of the colors and the vibrancy we see, not the fall foliage, although that's pretty spectacular right now, but all the colors that we would see on a beautiful spring day, that wouldn't exist if we didn't have insects pollinating them.
Right.
So we lose our native species and we lose the fauna that's here too, or the flora that's here too.
Yeah. So here's I love everything you're saying, by the way. Like you didn't even know. But a question that I'm particularly interested to ask you, right? And this is more of a personal question for me, but I think it's going to be a good fit. When I was a beekeeper,
in your past life,
in my past life, right, in which I may not be a version of your grandfather, and directed guerrilla traffic. Well, I ended up stopping doing it because. When I started doing it, I didn't understand that, put it this way. There's all these issues with honeybees, right? As you know, like, we put them on trucks and, there's advantages to the migratory beekeeping thing, but the standard ways that people use them in agriculture, a lot of that's not great for them. And so we were trying to design a business model that was like, how do people get local honey? How can we pollinate the farms that rely on honeybees? And, blah, 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 like making a win-win-win. And that was fun. We did that. But I ended up stopping because I came to understand the role that they played in, kind of the ecological web better. Honeybees, they're more like cattle, than they are like the gorilla, I guess you could say, right? Which they provide us, like they're native to somewhere.
Yeah.
I think Eastern
they're
Europe.
basically livestock.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We don't. They're not like part of nature, so to speak. Here, and so this idea that they need to be protected and conserved is just like not, it's a very specific distinction to make for people of like, sure, the way that we use honeybees in agriculture, there are problematic parts of that. Those should improve, but that is not the same as a conservation-oriented issue. And what really makes it complicated, which I'm sure you understand better than most people, is that oftentimes honeybees, if there's too many of them and there's not enough, pollen for the other pollinators, they can outcompete.
Yes, they can.
And weaken the health of, the native bee populations that are actually under, conservation threat. And so it was a hard thing, it was like, once I understood that, I was like, all right, no question. I got into this because I thought it was a net positive. And I'm not poo-pooing beekeepers. Like,
no,
people should keep bees. Just if your goal is to, quote unquote, save the bees, maybe don't like put a bunch of honeybees in your backyard if you think that it's going to like restore the honeybee population.
Sure.
Like that's like,
understand your reasoning for keeping them.
Right.
Because that's definitely not a conservation plea right there.
yeah.
It's a hobby, and it's a beautiful hobby. Keeping apiaries is ancient, right?
it's
Humans
great.
have been doing this for as long as humans have been around. We found honey in the tombs of the ancient Egyptians.
Right.
But is that something that's going to help? No, not particularly. It'll help
Yeah.
you as a beekeeper, which is cool, and honey is effectively magic as far as I'm concerned.
Sugary magic.
Sugary
So
magic,
good.
yeah, it's absolutely incredible. But yeah, you're right. If you're thinking about like, I want to help conservation and I want to increase biodiversity in my region, then planting for native pollinators is definitely your better bet.
Yeah. Well, but that the fundamental, I don't know, kind of issue that I had and that I want your advice on is like, how do you take, as an educator, people bring, their good intentions, their enthusiasm, their love, and they say, oh, I love bees. I love everything that bees do. And, they think honeybees are everything. And like, how do you take what's good about that of like, all right, great. We got someone energized. They want to get involved. They want to help, and then you're on the other side of it with, your expert knowledge and your nuance. And you're like, how do I explain to this person like what's actually helpful, or like how do I channel the fire that's being lit in them by whatever cool part of nature they're experiencing? Like, tell me about, I don't know, your experience doing that as an educator. How do you
Sure.
how do you manage all that, particularly when maybe people have a misconception about
Yeah.
something?
Yeah. I think the first word that comes to mind is exposure.
Yeah.
And introducing them to the native species, and introducing the species in a way that, intentionally or otherwise, makes them fall in love with them. And that's getting down in their habitats,
Yeah.
going into the gardens, going into the field, going into the forest, and being silent and being a silent observer. I want you guys to use all of your senses except for don't talk. Just keep your mouth closed for a little bit of time and really be present. Be as in be like a bee. Yeah, I figured there's a joke coming. Here we go.
No, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Be silent except for the little buzz.
Yes. We want you to hear, we want you to see, we want you to smell. And the more that they see that this is naturally occurring, this isn't cultivated.
Right.
This is occurring on its own. We're in the forest. No one has planted the forest. It's been here. It's happening on its own. And look at all of the insects that are actively living, improving, changing, altering this small space. This is cool. And they all agree this is cool. We try to evoke when I'm talking with kids are easy because their curiosity is constantly piqued.
Right.
Adults, you have to return to childhood. Think of your first nature experience, whether it was on a blade of grass in a suburban backyard, whether it was on a spike of goldenrod bursting through the concrete in Manchester.
Yeah.
What was your first experience and how did it make you feel? And our adults get silent and they really start going back. And we talk about taking that child on a walk, hold their hand and be at their level. Go seek, go find, go explore, but don't talk. There's no need for it.
Yeah.
Don't talk with each other. Be with your inner child. And I've had really great responses, and you can feel the energy go from up here static, because people are always adults, right? We're always thinking, well, what's coming next? We're anticipating something.
Yeah, you can't
Is there going to be
turn it
another
off.
question, right? Like, are they going to ask me a question? I need to have an answer. No, just want you to be with your inner child for a little bit. These are your parameters. This is a safe space. and just be, and then come back. And you can feel the energy ground. You can literally feel it coming from up here in static, moving into the earth. And by the time they come back, everyone, their shoulders have eased, their eyes are calmer, their body language has softened, and they're able to share some form of excitement that is not in any fashion synonymous with stress.
Right.
And that's really cool. And then from there, you can start explaining, how can we better support that feeling that you guys are having for everyone, as an adult, as a child, as a senior, as any stage of human? How can we better support that? And that's how you get conservation leaders.
You're like a yoga instructor for the outdoors.
It's incredible.
I feel relaxed now.
I love it. I love it so much. And I think it's so important for us to remember who we were as children, because we had so much to learn. We were learning so much, but we already knew what we needed.
Yeah.
And that's that peace and safety and tranquility that nature can provide. Even when it's being chaotic and fractious, there's still some sense of peace in it because it's happening without interference. And I think it's cool stuff. And then they get really excited about the little things. And from the little things, we can start looking at the bigger things.
Yeah. Well, how fun must it be then for you to do these, put in a garden in urban, again, not that like urban areas are inherently bad, but, they are inherently lacking in nature,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Like that's what urban means. So to put a garden in the middle of, the concrete jungle,
Yeah.
I bet you do more good for people than you can even,
I hope so.
think of all the folks who must walk by and be like, oh, look at that.
That's what we hope.
Zen moment.
That's definitely the hope, because the idea with the original intention was, let's support the pollinators, right? But New Hampshire Audubon stance is supporting New Hampshire's wild spaces for wildlife and people.
Yeah.
And without the people, we really can't do too much, right? Like, the gorillas aren't helping us pay for these fundings. We need human assistance.
Yeah.
The gorilla fund. Maybe we should be working on the gorilla fund. I don't know. I think they've taken care of that over
They're loaded
in their locations.
Yeah.
But yeah, the moose, right? The moose is working. Not in
Right.
downtown Manchester, but we do need to start seeing those smaller things, right? We're talking, funny enough, right? Gorillas, huge presence.
Right.
Moose, enormous presence. Honeybee, humongous presence for something
Right.
that's not even here on its own in a
Yeah.
natural state. But let's talk about the sweat bees. Let's
Right.
learn a little bit more about the minor bees and some of our less flashy butterflies. Everyone's familiar with the monarch, but how confident are we at identifying a painted lady? A swallowtail.
Not.
Yeah, right? So, and even smaller. I'm using pretty big, beefy butterflies, but there's
Yeah.
some that are so small that they could sit on your pinky nail.
Oh.
And I know, right? And
amazing.
precious, right? And all of them start their lives as a little tiny egg and then as a caterpillar. And so many of us, I'm a gardener, and a lot of us see caterpillars as the villain, right? That's something, we don't want the caterpillars in the garden.
Right.
But without those caterpillars, we don't have the butterflies.
Yeah.
So it's really recognizing that the whole life cycles of all of these species and trying to support every stage of them. And that's a really important element with the pollinator gardens, which we're hoping to share with the public, so that if they wish to do something on their own scale, whether it's in a pot or a patio or acreage,
Right.
they can learn how to do that from these examples that we're providing them with.
I really like the way that you're talking about all these issues right now, because something I run into a lot, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people, maybe particular, young people, they have this conception that, human beings, human civilization and nature, or the well-being of nature are, they're fundamentally at odds with each other, right? And I don't like that. I don't like thinking that's true. And your organization is, it's a human. The gorillas are not in the office, even though they're not a particularly good example because they're like our cousins evolutionarily,
I know,
or
right?
whatever, right? So, maybe the gorilla could be a great secretary or whatever, but or bouncer, but secretarial work's hard work. I'm not dinging secretaries, but the butterflies, right? Like it's not butterflies in the Audubon office,
No,
out there
that'd be
doing all these
adorable, but no,
projects,
it's
right?
not. Mm.
Right. It's human people,
It's
right?
us.
And that's a story that I think is really cool. That I want. You're here. Obviously, I'm biased. Like, I think it's great. I want to highlight it more. And even like you're talking about the biologists or the scientists that you work with, their passion and their knowledge across half a century.
Yeah.
Like you don't end up that doesn't happen unless there's real love there, between the person and seeing themselves maybe as part of the ecosystem and whatnot.
I would say so.
Yeah. So to that end, or in that spirit, Willa, maybe tell me, I mean, you've talked about some really cool projects you've done, but there have been some great success stories,
Yes,
like I'd love to hear you share a little more about, like, what are you proudest of at New Hampshire Audubon, or what are some of the great successes, that you've had lately?
Okay.
And then we're only talking because there was some great news on the peregrines and the bald eagles, and maybe take us there for a little bit.
Oh, I certainly can. So that's definitely where my passion lays originally. So that was why it was like, wait, we're switching to insects? I'm more feathers than scales, but okay, I guess we can do
it's
this.
Birds. We begin with birds and we work outward.
Yeah, we do, or we did historically, and now I think everyone's just recognized the interconnectivity, right? You can't just focus on birds because they rely on so many other species, including us, for their survival. But anyways, we'll come back to the peregrines. So peregrine falcons, as you may or may not know, were suffering extremely during the DDT era. So they were exposed to a common household chemical that we were using just for maintenance, right? It was something that was as common in your cupboards as flour and sugar in the pantry.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was having some really negative ramifications because it was moving up the food chain, right? The idea was that it would target insects, and that was that. It would just end there. But as we are discussing right now, it never ends with just one species. And so smaller insectivorous birds were consuming this poison, and then larger species were consuming those birds, and it goes up the ladder for the food chain. The food web, we should say, because it's just everywhere. It's not just one species eating one other species. It's a buffet for all out there. And so peregrine falcons and brown pelicans and many different birds of prey, and a pelican would not be a bird of prey, clarifying that, but they are eating other species that were contaminated with this DDT. And it wasn't killing them outright, but it was affecting their ability to reproduce from start to finish. Eggshells were getting so weakened from the chemicals in the DDT that they weren't able to be properly incubated. And so they were crumbling. The shells were breaking down. Yeah, there was a calcium deficiency. The eggs were being broken down. And so before the chick could finish development and hatch, it was getting crumbled because the birds have to naturally roll them gently so that they can rotate the heat. Nice. And so we were quickly seeing a rapid decline in population. We had adults still, but there was no new fledglings coming up. And without new fledglings to increase the population or stabilize the population started drastically declining. Okay. And so fortunately, people have always been enamored by birds. We've always had some sort of fascination in these species. And the bigger birds are easier to see, right? Our big raptors, peregrine falcons are so charismatic. They've got such unique adaptations that make them adept at doing what they do. And biologists as well as birders started seeing a decline. Where are the peregrines going? Why are we not having new clutches being reared and fledging? And they made the correlation with this particular chemical. And I'm telling you a very, very brief story of a very long chapter.
Decades of science
and research and absolutely like doing like the chemical strains, pulling it out of the eggs. And so I'm giving a very brief version of this because I want to get to the hopeful stuff.
I'm sure there was an extraordinary pushback from whoever made DDT and all
Understandable,
that stuff,
but imagine the ramifications of if we had just continued to allow this to happen, what it would be doing to the human population as well.
Well, this is bioaccumulation.
Yeah. Well, both actually. So bioaccumulation is when it's accumulating in the body. Biomagnification is as it's getting larger up the tertiary chain.
Okay.
So one little insect is maybe consuming 0.001 parts per million.
Yeah.
But one little bird who's consuming one insect, that's not enough for them to eat, right? One little tiny gnat. So they're eating 700 gnats, which means they are biomagnifying those chemicals inside of themselves. Yeah. And we deal with that when we're talking about fish.
I'm converting that to Oreos in my head.
I would say like something with like high mercury count from the ocean.
Yeah.
Think about that little element, right? Our big, huge swordfish are eating much, much, much smaller fish, but those fish have smaller exposure, and then it bioaccumulates and biomagnifies up the food chain and to us.
Well, I'm glad that I'm glad that we're figuring it out.
Right? And we've known this since the 70s, guys.
Yeah.
So long story short, with the DDT era, it was effectively banned, which is phenomenal. And this is why the peregrine falcon is used as such a conservation success story, because once it was banned, there were all sorts of other implementations that took place in terms of hand rearing some chicks, kind of collecting fertile eggs and setting them up in different locations. And this isn't that peregrine falcons were at risk of extinction across the globe. It was localized spaces where it just based on the proximity to the chemical exposure, they weren't doing well. It's kind of like the lead poisoning with bald eagles. It wasn't impacting our Canadian brethren because they weren't using the lead shot as frequently, but it was happening down here. And so there was never a risk of like full-blown species extinction, but it was still, I mean, imagine a New Hampshire without peregrine falcons. It would be such a devastating, sad, barren place.
A little bit of extinction doesn't sounds bad too.
Yes, it is. And it changes the whole demographics of ecology in a region. I mean, we have so many, another like, not anything to do with the birds, but think of how many white-tailed deer and rabbits we have out here now.
Yeah.
And what they're doing to our herbaceous plants because they don't have any natural predators, right?
Yeah.
There's a balance before there were humans. And when we alter things, it sets it off, and it takes some time for that to rebalance itself.
Right.
But the peregrine falcons are making a massive recovery. We saw maybe, I can't remember statistics. I wish I had my chart with me. I'd do a whole PowerPoint slide for you guys. I get really jazzed about the peregrines, but not a lot. I mean, by not a lot, I mean like 2 nesting sites in the 70s, and now we're dealing with significantly more than that. The chart just goes up and up and up with sited locations, which is mostly volunteer-based under Chris Martin's guidance, who's assisting with locating them, documenting them, banding them so that we can monitor them and see where they're moving, and some successful fledges of up to 5 chicks in one season from one nest. I'm referring to the Brady Sullivan Tower nest because that's the one that I closely monitor down in right in the city of Manchester. Peregrine falcons are incredibly adaptable, so they are
Never would have guessed
using.
there was a falcon nest.
Oh yeah,
in that
there's
building.
there's one right at the 13th story.
And that's a cool example too.
He's right there in
Everyone knows
downtown
that.
Manchester. They do, and they call them the Falcon family. It's mom and dad and the Manchester Falcons. There's a Facebook page. I think it's Manchester Falcon fans.
That's so great.
We're really into it,
Yeah.
and we don't have stickers yet, but guys, let's get on that soon.
Yeah.
They've consistently been there for decades, and that is where they go because they're very, very what's that word? They're very loyal to a territory,
Sure.
and they know that they can get all that they need from that location, and they can raise a family there. So there's enough food, pigeons, blue jays, right, that they can feed their nestlings, and we've had great success there.
What a great story from Manchester too.
And we teach a program about the peregrine falcons to students within the Manchester corridor too. So we have our students recognizing that those are your birds. Like, you share a habitat with these incredible birds of prey.
Yeah.
And not only that, you guys have the Merrimack coursing through the city, and that's home and territory for ospreys and bald eagles. And they understand the success element of that and how it was people that genuinely, like, did we do the damage first? Yep. We did. But we also figured out a way to solve the problem and bring these species back from the brink.
Yeah.
And so it's hope. We're teaching hope with those stories too.
Yeah.
And giving stewardship to the students because these are your birds, because this is your city. And it's been some pretty cool stuff. We've had some really great feedback from the students, from the teachers who have participated in it. And I should say, I always forget, this is the most important part. It's on webcam.
Oh.
We can watch live stream 365 days a year. 24/7, night cam, audio, the Falcons.
I want to get that on.
It's
I wanna put it on.
Peregrine Networks, and it's not the most exciting thing at this time of year because it's just mom and dad.
Hold on, I'm going to try and pull
Please
it
do.
up
I'll
right
keep
now.
talking about it. It's amazing. So you get to really watch the phenology of these birds. You see the courtship displays as dad is passing caught food. And for those of you that aren't familiar with peregrine falcons' diets, they are entirely carnivorous and they are bird eaters. They catch their prey on the fly. So unlike red-tailed hawks who kind of sit, perch, and pounce onto a prey that's on the ground, like a rabbit, a chipmunk, squirrel, peregrine falcons actually catch them directly out of the air. So they are unbelievable flyers, just acrobats of the sky. And so you'll see food passes on occasion where dad is dropping food from the air and mom catches it in midair, and that's a show of, hey, I've got this covered. Like, I can support a family. Look how good I am at catch and prey. And then you will see mating, and you will see the eggs being laid. You will see the eggs being incubated. You will see the chicks hatching, the feeding process, the growth and development that happens really rapidly over 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And then the actual fledging of the chicks, who look like adult peregrine falcons by the time they're like 8 weeks old.
So this is the live. They can't. I don't care if this isn't going to show
Okay.
up on the camera, but like this is the live camera.
Yeah,
right
so there's the
now.
armory right down there. We got some poop remains down there.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
you can see the perch. So mom and dad are off doing their thing, apparently scoping out their city.
Well, there's a chat.
And there's a chat.
And someone's commenting like, "Dad arrived."
Yeah.
Dad flies off. You know.
And we will record specific events. So if there's something unique that happens, every once in a while, a chick will return to the nest, and so we can. What's that called when you like clip it? Yeah, you clip it, and then you can save it as a recording, and then we'll put it on the website so folks can see it.
That's
There was one
awesome.
year when Dad brought in a bat for mom, which was really exciting because you were, oh my gosh, they're not mammal consumers, but bats and birds look pretty darn similar on the fly.
There
so
are 6 people watching this right now.
we are, and I'm probably one of them. It's just like live streaming on my computer. No, it's
I love that.
it's really cool. And this is all over the planet, right? This is
Right.
our Manchester Falcons, but you can watch bald eagles in Pennsylvania and Washington State. You can see, I can't even tell you all of the different species, but we're using technology to create that connection. And that connection helps foster stewardship, and stewardship leads to support. So it's really, really cool. And our kiddos, I'm very, oh my gosh, is that an orangutan right there? I just noticed.
It is.
Yeah, on your
It's a
laptop.
stencil. Yeah.
It's excellent, yes. I almost misidentified it as a gorilla, but I
No,
fixed myself.
you wouldn't make that mistake.
So yeah, the Falcons are awesome. It's a success story. The bald eagles are something similar, different issue, but something that was identified, recognized, and then fortunately fixed. Although that one we're still dealing with some challenges because lead is still available.
It's everywhere.
It's still available, right?
Yeah.
Like you can still buy it, and folks will say, "Well, I'm shooting the deer." And I'm taking the deer. I'm like, but are you taking all of the deer?
Right.
Because a lot of field dressing is you clear out the guts, and when those lead bullets hit, they shatter, they combust, and teeny tiny fragments accumulate.
Right.
And lead poisoning with birds is terrible. It is not a peaceful death.
Yeah.
It's slow and painful and does not have a very high success, even if they're found early.
Yeah.
A down bird, right? Like a bird who's consumed lead can't fly. They're disoriented. Their nervous system is damaged. A down bird is a dead bird.
Yeah.
And it's not a quick like, oh, boom, they're dead. It's long and lingering. And we have alternatives. So being
Right.
able to communicate those things, not so much to our children, right? We don't do that to the kids. We don't believe in tears before 10.
Yeah.
But allowing everyone to know that there's small steps that we can be doing to help these majestic species that we accidentally almost killed a while ago. Like
Yeah.
maybe we can try to reduce our impact now and move our energy into a positive way.
Yeah. Well, so over there's all the equipment for Nemo, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're a local. Well, they're worldwide, but they're headquartered here in Dover, New Hampshire.
I did not
or
know that.
nearby. Yeah.
Nemo.
Yeah. They're one of the most. Well, not like they're like a specialty camping gear.
Yeah, they're good stuff. They
Kind of
have
retailer.
fantastic sleeping bags.
Yeah. So their director of sustainability and government affairs, who's a friend of mine and a friend of Treeline Outfitters, Teresa McKenney, came on here a little while ago, and she told this great story about how what was the thing, PFAS, right?
Oh,
it was all
yeah.
about PFAS,
Yeah,
and she
yeah.
was like, PFAS, they work great. That's why they're everywhere. They do exactly what we want them to do when we are, needing to have a backpack that doesn't catch on fire or whatever, something like that, But they're horrible, they're toxic, and all these. I don't know if that's exactly the right word to use, but they mess up the endocrine system. And she gave all these great reasons for why we should move away from using PFAS. And then California or some other state introduce some legislation, and I feel like this is always how it goes of people, and this is her words, she told this story that I think is a good example of what you're getting at. The industry often says, hey, this is too impossible, we can't do it, or some people say that. I'm not trying to poo-poo industry, but but Nemo, because they're forward thinking and they're innovative, said, we just want to make a really good, fabric for our camping tent. And I'm butchering this story. And we'd like to not use PFAS. And so their goal was to just, make something that was like worked better, had a more elegant, footprint on the environment and on people. And then later on, there were the legislative tailwinds for that work too. And because they began that project before kind of the rest of the, system caught up and said, wow, we really shouldn't be putting these in anything, then they were ahead of the game. And they ended up making, it was like the best tent fabric they've ever had, just because, the process of innovate. That's more of a story about innovation, but, this idea, as you say, like there's alternatives.
There is. We
can do so many things. Yeah. And that's the beauty of, so much of your work, right? Is like, these are all solvable problems. Like we're not here in, I don't know, 18, although I'm sure they're naturalists. We could have a whole thing about the history of naturalists, but like, we know so much now. And
we have the advances of technology.
Right, we can do all these things. We can,
And a lot of the things that we've done in the past it was through, we didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Right? At that point in time, this was the problem. Here is a solution. But it wasn't a solution for the future. It was a in the moment solution. And I think we really we need to, and we can, technology alone can figure out, okay, this will work right now, but what's it going to look like in 2 years, 10 years, 200 years?
Right.
What are the deep-rooted impacts of this? Instead of like, yes, it's going to work for today, but what's it going to look like for our grandkids?
Yeah.
And that's something that we have now, right? We have that ability to do, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And it takes funding, and that's always challenging too.
Yeah. Well, it is an interesting thing to put into perspective, right? Because it's a tricky thing. I feel like when you zoom out and you look at the whole landscape of all the really big things, that are happening in the world and happen in the world, and like, it's all, and there's things that are, true in ways that like feel contradictory, and one of my favorite sayings, right, is, the world is awful, right? Because, there's kids who die from preventable diseases. We know, like no kid should have to die when they're really young because they didn't get, medicine for diarrhea or whatever. Like that's inexcusable. So like, all right, the world's not good because of that. The world is better than it used to be because, that number, child mortality used to be much higher than it used to be, or than, you know what I mean? Currently, in 1800, it was like much, much higher. And that's gone down. And that's a good thing. Like no one is pro child mortality.
No,
right?
no, really not.
Like no one's rooting for that. And the world can be better than it is today.
Yes.
Right? They're all true at the same time.
Yes.
And, the whole, I think, you could have an interesting debate about like, when really does the history of, conservation or like our modern notions of conservation like begin, right? Like, did it really begin with, the flurry of laws in the 60s and 70s of like the Clean Air Act and all that stuff, or is that an adaptation of traditions of, Emerson and all these other people, or indigenous people, right? Who like, they didn't write things down, or the records have been lost of, hey, actually let these wildflowers burn. It's better. We know, cause we've lived here for thousands of years. Like that's how you manage the landscape. So I don't know, you as an educator, this is turning into a question, Willa. As an educator, that must be an interesting thing to sit with. Like, where do you see yourself, or where do you see, I don't know, New Hampshire Audubon, or when you talk to kids, like, what are the stories you tell them about all this stuff, I guess?
With the kids.
Yeah. Or what are the stories you find most interesting to tell, like in the history of environmentalism or?
Well, I guess that would involve us actually talking more about environmentalism in the classroom, which we don't really do at this point in time.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds kind of confusing, like you guys, that's what you do. It's environmental education, but environmentalism is it's like that conceptual theory concept of like, what is environmentalism? And Well, it's less than that for us with kids in particular, because kids they already have that curiosity, right? It's already sparked. So for us, it's trying to keep it sparked, because what is more enticing at this point in time, TikTok or spotted salamanders?
Yeah.
And that's tricky.
Right.
That is tricky. And spotted salamanders are actually really exciting. Like, that's easy to get kids jazzed about. But
cool, right.
Let's talk about the toad. I don't want to talk about the toad. I like the spotted salamander. I like the flamingos. I like the orcas. I like this goofball on YouTube who's making millions of dollars by pretending to be an orca.
Right.
It's become a challenge to compete with the fast-paced elements of technology.
Yeah.
And so we can't even broad scale environmentalism because it's too confusing. It's not tangible for students.
Yeah.
But what we can do is bring them out into the field and have them use those senses again. They're already in tune to the child within. So having them we create opportunities for them to connect with nature and let them foster a relationship that they might be losing because they're growing.
Right.
And we have this gap that occurs historically in generations is middle school, right? Maybe it's hormones, but something triggers some sort of disconnect from nature where they want to be focused on that social element of growing as a person, right?
Sure.
Stretching the edge. Who am I? What am I doing? It's that really weird limbo between childhood and adulthood.
Yeah.
And it's a challenging one. It was challenging in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I can't even imagine what it's like today where you've got all this influence with these computers in our back pocket. So trying to remove that enticement of quick, rapid gratification to let's pause and be still and just focus. And I don't know if I'm answering this question right, because environmentalism is like,
perfect,
it's just a very broad scale thing. But what we're doing is we're creating connections. I think that honestly, if you could boil down everything with what we do, it's creating connections with nature.
Yeah.
Whether it's observing peregrine falcons through binoculars by standing in the parking lot at the Brady Sullivan Tower and seeing how they maneuver the city and how adaptable they are and how resilient they are, right? They know the story. The kids know the stories of how they were almost gone. And here they are, flourishing in their own city.
Right.
In a location that is not normal per se for them to be. And kids are nomadic at this point in time, especially in Manchester. We've got kids that don't know where they're sleeping that night.
Right.
But here they are looking at this majestic species in the sky. And they're looking at, wow, Miss Willa, we just planted these flowers and there's bumblebees on them. And oh my gosh, oh my gosh, a monarch just flew by.
Yeah.
When was the last time you guys saw a monarch? We never have. And then being able to get them excited about that, I think it gives them hope. I'd like to think it gives them hope. You see them getting excited about it, and you didn't used to see them getting excited about that. It was, when can we go back inside?
Sure.
When can we go back in the classroom? Or, you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
now they're interacting with these gardens, and we're having a hard time pulling them away from the gardens. Like, guys, we have to get back in the classroom.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Right.
And I get angry at the teachers. Sorry, teachers. You guys know. I know I get a little short with you guys because I'm like, it's just 2 more minutes. Like, just give us 2 more minutes.
Yeah.
And that is something I would love to see change in the future, is environmental education become a mandatory topic in all of the classes in the world.
Yeah.
And it is for some schools, but it is not the common norm.
Right.
And it's such a disservice to the students. And a lot of the teachers will say, well, this is going to be a tough class. Like, good luck. You know, they're like feral when we go outside. And I was like, because they don't have a focus. You can't just expect kids who have been locked up in a classroom for the past 8 years of their lives to go outside as 14-year-olds and interact in an appropriate way.
Yeah.
You have to give them something to do. This is the goal. This is what we're going to do today. This is what we're seeking. So there's parameters, but it's also really broad. And it gives them autonomy, and it gives them the opportunity to engage. And when they get engaged, they connect, and they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And it's just like watching them come back to life, these kids. They're sitting in the classroom and touching their phones and fiddling with everything and no eye contact. And all of a sudden it's, so guess what? We're going outside. And they're like, what are we going to do outside? This is what we're going to do, a scavenger hunt.
What aren't we going to do outside? Right?
We're going to do, right? We're going to do all of these things. You guys are going to have rotating centers, and we're bird watching over here. We're going to do a pollinator transfer over here. You guys are going to pretend to have different adaptations and have to use your different senses. And it gets them out of that 2D lifestyle that they're getting really, really comfortable with on the phones and on the TV screens and on the computers and the PowerPoints and all the things that are traditional education at this point in time. All classrooms have a smart TV now.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're calling it smart. We need to get outside.
Yeah.
We need to get outside and touch and smell and use more than just our audio visual.
Yeah. Man, I couldn't agree more. So there's a cool story that this is a little shameless, but I put it in my most recent Good News New Hampshire newsletter. There was a study that UNH published, I think in partially in concert with some folks who work in kind of the outdoor rec space.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole kind of industry group for like, the New Hampshire's outdoor recreational economy. A lot of the NEMO folks are active there too. And it basically, again, I'm not quite describing it correctly, I bet, but it was very similar to what you're talking about. They basically, studied, hey, if we, expose kids, particularly kids in like rural communities, to the outdoors and some very basic like STEM concepts, in a particular way at a particular age, like give them these kind of formative experiences.
Yes.
Later on, you'll see more like a lot of those careers, in kind of outdoor rec that, or use STEM things like, hey, you need to design or operate drones to help do like trail maintenance or land monitoring or, everything. There's so many applications.
There's so many applications.
I mean, this is your whole thing, you know about this, but these career paths became easier, for these kids in ways that particularly
they do,
women.
I should say.
Yeah,
yes, because I think I've been reading the same things you have.
I'm sure, yeah.
And it's when we have we do pre-surveys and post-surveys for our students when we do longitudinal programs. So the Peregrine Falcon program is actually 5 lessons that occur during the breeding season and the chick rearing season. So we start off with communication in January, and we see those kids in February, March, April, May, and June. Their experience, what they tell us about later is, I didn't think I was good at science.
Right.
Or I didn't think I would be interested in birds. And you ask them later and they're like, oh my God, birds are so cool.
Yeah.
And being able to sit, like, I've become a more observant person. I'm like, the fact that you know the word observant now is impressive. Like, these are 6th graders.
Wow.
And they are actively going outside. Like, what do you do in your spare time? We give them like a nice little poll of, I hang out with my friends, I play on my tablet or my smartphone, I do sports, I do this. And it changed over the course of 5 months because one of them was spend time in nature. And at the beginning, spend time in nature, kind of vague, like what does that mean? And we explain to kids like, you hang out, you go for walks in the woods, you fool around in puddles, like anything that's involving the outside that's not using an internal tool or object. And it improved after the program. Like, I found myself like hanging out and watching birds, and they're astonished themselves. Like, I just like hung out for like 30 minutes and watched leaves falling.
I never imagined I'd be someone.
100%. And what's more was they were like, and I'm doing it with my family.
Yeah.
Like, I asked my family to come with me to the Brady Sullivan Tower so we could watch the birds, and we all watched the birds together. And my mom and dad are still watching the camera today, and we're like, it's working.
Yeah.
You're creating that connection. You're introducing them to a relationship they might not have known that they had. We've had students that say, I think I want to be an ornithologist. And then we ask them, did you know what an ornithologist was before the program? No, we didn't even know how to pronounce the word ornithology.
Yeah.
And it's just been really, really cool. And it's not the underlying, like, goal isn't to make them all bird scientists, but it's to offer them the opportunity to learn you can do anything.
Yeah.
And science isn't just that white lab coat, right? That's what I grew up thinking. You had to have crazy hair and goggles and lab coats and be doing like mad scientists with bubbles, and that's not what a scientist has to be.
Bubbles.
Yeah, there's always some sort of foam and
Chemistry.
explosion, a boom, right?
Right,
And part of me was hoping for that. But there's also, people that are learning about bats in caves, subterranean locations, and up in the jungle forest where they're hanging out in the canopy observing different species, or down in the ocean. And if you don't like wildlife, that's totally fine too, guys. Maybe you want to be botanists and be in a lab, like spinning chlorophyll out from plants and using it as an alternative to something. I don't know. Or building robots or drones, like all this, like, the science as an umbrella rather than just like science equals lab coat equals you need to be really good at chemistry.
Yeah.
They need to hear that that's not what science is. Science can be out in a canoe observing northern harriers like Chris Martin. It can be up tromping through ferns up to your elbows in the White Mountains looking for rusty blackbirds, if that's what you want to be doing, and traveling across the globe and connecting with other like-minded people who are focused on saving the planet one species at a time. And it's very, very cool because it's very, very empowering to these students.
Yeah.
They've been told, like, you're not a good student. You're not just a student, you're a person.
Right.
So what are your passions and what makes you happy? And sometimes introducing them to, when we do a reptile and amphibian program, they see a turtle for the first time. That's a spark. when we're doing mammals, we don't even have live mammals, but we bring in skulls and pelts, and they say, wow, that skull looks really similar to my skull. Be like, how are you more similar to these animals than you thought?
Right.
That's a spark.
Yeah.
Even the insects, right? We talk about what's your favorite fruit to eat and rattle off different fruits. And imagine a fruit salad that didn't have any of those fruits you just mentioned, because the animals that are responsible for making sure they exist are gone.
Yeah.
Giant saucer eyes, and how can we help them? Because I really like watermelon.
Right.
That's awesome. We
Yeah.
are helping create a spark, and then we are blowing on it
Yeah.
and creating opportunities for them to really, really flourish. And let's get the conflagrations going. Like, we're not talking about forest fires, but we're talking about fire in the belly, that stuff that makes you want to get up in the morning and do something.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, that impact does compound over time, the fact that you're even doing like longitudinal work or seeing the interventions and all that, like that's a really cool thing. I'm not like, you're an example, like you had these experiences that spoke to you, and now you've like sought a career in it, and it's like now you light the fire for other people. I'll tell you two personal stories that you're probably going to think are ridiculous.
No, I disagree.
But like, I don't even remember, I think it was like the rainforest unit. It's like, I don't know why it is
That was
this.
my favorite unit in school.
It's like the rainforest in Egypt. Like every year, grades 1 through 5, it's like that's all I remember.
Yeah.
Every year, I felt like we studied ancient Egypt like a ton, and the rainforest. But to this day, my email handle is the same one that I used when I was 11.
Oh my gosh!
I learned about the rainforest, and they were cutting it down, and it was bad or whatever, and Tropicana ran this like promotion where you could, send email them the code on the back of the orange juice carton. And for every carton that you would email them, they would conserve
a section of rainforest.
Yeah, they claimed they would conserve like an acre of rainforest or something. And I was just learning about the rainforest unit at that moment, and I was 3rd grade. And so I was like, well, the solution is obvious. If I drink enough orange juice,
we can save the forest.
We can save
That's
the Amazon,
incredible.
And so I think after like 11 cartons,
you were sick. And also,
I was like, I don't know about this, Mom and Dad.
Oh, man.
Like, there's a lot of orange juice to drink. But to participate in that, I made my email address savethetrees133 at Gmail.
Gosh.
And it's still
it's still active today.
It's still the handle I have.
Well, and look at
everything,
that brilliant marketing. I mean, clearly you're not going to save the forest.
Yeah, that doesn't.
By drinking
the math
orange
doesn't
juice.
Quite work out.
But creating a simple concept of if you do this, then we can do this. It works, right?
Yeah, I was way
worked.
into it. Yeah, it totally worked.
And so I guess this could open up so many different tangents. I know you have another story, but we are really focused on. So in New Hampshire Audubon, because we're New Hampshire, we're not national. We have a much smaller ecosystem out here, right? We're not talking about anything west of the Rockies. We don't have deserts out here. We don't have prairies. We have our forest. We have a little bit of coast, right? We're here in Portsmouth.
We're very proud of our 12 miles of coastline.
Right? I agree. I'm always stoked about that. But where am I going here? All right. We have all of those, like as children, we can identify lions and tigers, right? That's not even a question. Like, I know that's a lion. I know that's a tiger. I know that's a flamingo. I know that's a toucan. And it's like, these kids have never physically seen these birds.
Right.
Or those mammals. Like, it's not going to happen. You bring a kid out into the forest and they can't identify a red fox or a woodpecker. And it's like, that's a problem.
Yeah, why is that?
Why are we so focused on the big, grandiose, exciting species that we may or may not ever see in our life when we could be getting a deeper connection with the animals that we cohabitate with? And so here at our organization, it's really about creating that connection with our native flora and fauna.
Right.
We know our trees. Like, let's get to know our trees. I want you guys to be able to identify them, not just by their leaves, but by their bark and what animals rely on them for their habitat homes. And it creates that stewardship. We're fostering these granite goodness kids, right? Where they're proud of their stuff. They're like, we know who our state mammal is, our state bird is, our state wildflower, our state tree. And it gives them pride. And with pride usually comes a bit of stewardship. Yeah. And so it's that whole idea of like, this is yours and this is unique and it's special and it's beautiful, and love it because you have it. Like, foliage has become really important to talk about because there are impacts with the changing climate, and it's not happening elsewhere in the world. Like New England is a really unique spot because all the stars align to make brilliant foliage. And having our kids who grew up here, right? Like we just knew we get foliage.
Yeah.
They don't know that that's not what it looks like elsewhere. And so being able to explain like this is a gift from nature. How can we support that so we always have it it's fun. And they get excited about it.
Well,
and not just kids, like this is adults too.
Yeah,
I just
no.
refer to humans as kids. Like if you are actively engaging in life and learning, you are still a student.
If you haven't decided that you're done.
Yeah, right?
You're done in taking new information and challenging your conception of yourself. You know, that's the
lifelong learning.
The beauty of childlike and youth and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, again, I'm not like the best example, but you know, there were a number of organizations or experiences, like as a kid, environmentalism in some form like made its way to me, you know, in the classroom or in my community, and like it's remained very important to me as I've grown up. When I went to, you know, get a license plate and I saw the option, I was
conservation.
I was like, why wouldn't I do that? Why would I not do that?
Yeah.
It's like a very nominal amount of money more. It's you buy it once, you know, and it's like, I don't know. So it's just like these little tiny things, they add up, I guess. My other silly story was I took an ornithology class.
Wow.
And this is going to end up into a question for you. In college, I didn't do that well at it. I had to take it for a grad requirement, and I ended up like really enjoying it. And most of the class, like your grade was based on like how well can you visually identify birds, and like I really sucked at that. And then unfortunately a smaller portion of it was the auditory, right? And I was very good at it.
That's impressive.
Which I was like, well, it's just
That's how your brain is
yeah,
hardwired.
I had a thing for it. You know, I've been a musician, you know,
There we
almost all
go.
my
I was
life.
just gonna say, have you had a musical background?
Yeah, and so that was like a way in for me.
Yeah.
That was really, really cool, you know, and you know, again, it was like 200 birds or whatever, and I don't know. I was a little like I enjoyed knowing that like I was the best in the class at it. You know, I was like, all right, I know everyone else. You can do the visual ID.
Yeah.
I can't do that. But you know, there's like 100 calls here to learn. I know exactly what each of them are. You know, and I'd come up with all these silly, you know,
Like
mnemonic
devices,
right?
yeah.
Like the Veery. Its bird call to me sounds like the sound that an alien mothership would make. You know, it's like that's not what it sounds like. But so in my head, I was like, okay, Veery, aliens. There's all these crazy conspiracy theories for aliens. Theory rhymes with Veery.
Yes.
It's the Veery theory.
Yes.
You know, so you would have all these ways.
There's someone rapping songs for birds now, and I think that's awesome.
That's awesome. So I don't know. That was the thing for me. But like, you must find for kids or all the people you educate, like there's infinite ways to kind of find your way of I don't know, seeing or understanding the natural world.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. And I think we encourage the kids to use all of their senses, and adults too, and figure out a way that works for you. Adults are much more interested in categorizing, labeling,
Right.
you know, taxonomic referencing, right? I need to know the name of that bird. With the kids, it's not important. I just want you to get excited about seeing that it's a bird and know like that is a bird versus a mammal. Why? Be able to explain that element to it. And we encourage them to come up with their own names for the birds. So like
That's
all
really
of us
cool.
might be seeing what most adults would call a northern cardinal.
Yeah.
But we've got, you know, a bunch of the kids are calling it the red mohawk bird. And I think that's great. They're calling it the black bib bird, the black bib red bird, because it has the males have a black bib and it's a
Right.
red bird. And I don't care if that's not what everyone is classifying it as. And the educators don't care. That's not important because we're not testing them on how well can you identify a bird. We are just thrilled that you're outside engaging with the bird and recognizing that that is something that's different than the blue mohawk bird, also referred to as the blue jay, or the blue orb, which they like to call the bluebird. And they know that they're different and they recognize their different patterns. And at some point in the day, and it clicks, they'll hear the blue jay, the blue mohawk bird and know who it is because they saw it in a tree before, whereas the blue bird would be in the field. And the kids will correct, like, well, that can't be the blue mohawk because they live in the forest, not in the field. And we're like, oh my gosh. So it doesn't matter that it's that element of like, that is an eastern bluebird. Not important.
Right.
They're already seeing that shaped bird that they refer to as the blue orb is the one in the field looking for the insects. And the blue mohawk bird is in the forest because they're focusing on a different food. And they're creating these connections that don't have to have a taxonomic reference. They're just connecting with them.
Yeah. Man, that's such a better way to educate, I feel like.
And then later, right? Like later on, they can be like, oh, the blue orb. And we joke with them, like, you got to tell us, like, what do adults call it? And we make it funny, like they're the ones that are really doing the identification, right? The blue orb probably is a better name for it. But what do us adults call it? That's the eastern bluebird. They know. And now they've expanded their vocabulary and they have that sort of connection where it's the blue orb is the blue bird, the blue mohawk bird is the blue jay. They're expanding their vocabulary, they're stretching their minds, and they're figuring out, it's almost like translation, like they're speaking another language now. They've got their kid talk and they've got their adult talk and they can switch back and forth.
Right. Or it's
wild.
It's almost like making friends too. You know, it's like when you meet someone new, some people are good at it, but most people are like, oh, I don't remember. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
What the hell is your name again?
Yes.
You know, and then later on you're asking someone else, what was the, hey,
so-and-so.
who was so-and-so with the
orange shirt? And yep.
Right.
They get it. And when they're experiencing it together, 100%.
And then their name later.
Right. And they start noticing their silhouettes and their flight patterns and they get excited about them. They can identify them better than many adults after one field trip, because they're actively engaging with them and they're not being pressured because it's not a test.
Right.
Like you're not ticking it off on the book. It's just to experience what going out into the forest and looking for species feels like, what it sounds like, and how it makes you feel.
I want to go on a bird walk now.
We've got them all the time. We have naturalists that lead them. So if you want to go out on it, I consider myself a bird spy. I am not an ornithologist. I am not even a bird watcher. And there's a fancy term for really like diehard birders. It's called a twitcher.
Okay.
And they go all over the world knocking off these life lists.
Yeah.
I'm a bird spy.
Sure.
I just enjoy watching them. I find them comical. I like that they all seem to have different personalities. Their behaviors are unique and they're beautiful. They're so focused on what they're doing that they don't seem to care that we're around, especially when you find a spot and you just slow bird, right? You just hang out for a bit. That's as important to me to teach to my students as it is to say, like, but all of these birds have actual names and documentation because we got to keep an eye on them. Because if you like watching them, sometimes it's important to have specific species that we can monitor. And that's that little, like, it turns it a little bit more sciencey versus artsy.
Right.
But we're meeting everyone where they are. And that's with the adults too. We just have fun.
Yeah.
Like sometimes nature can be intimidating for folks. And whether they're coming from a rural environment where they've lived in the forest their whole lives here in New Hampshire, or they're emigrating from Chicago, or I mean, as the case of a lot of our students from out of the country and places where they've fled from.
Right.
And the noises here are as intimidating to them as maybe gunshot might be to us.
Yeah.
Being able to take away the fear by encouraging curiosity and getting them out and being like, you're not in a dangerous place here. New Hampshire's, we're really lucky, right? We don't have venomous species for the most part.
Right.
We don't really have anything that's going to be too poisonous. We encourage kids, don't lick toads. We wouldn't advise it.
That's all we ask.
But for the most part, we refer to our most dangerous species is the tick, right? And so we talk about doing tick checks. But if that's the worst, don't be afraid.
Yeah, that's
curious.
Pretty good, actually.
Yeah, come out here and let's just focus on feeling excitement and come with questions, because there's no such thing as a dumb question, and we want you guys to learn as much as you can. And so it's pretty cool stuff. And we have to do like lecture components for some things so we can hit all those NGSS standards. So if there's any teachers listening, like that will be covered. You can justify bringing in field trips and having us visit. But for the most part, like our educators are incredibly passionate about the natural world, and we have great experiences. We've got some not great experiences, but we share the good stuff in hopes that our kids will be excited about receiving a similar experience themselves.
Willa, I could talk to you all day. You're very good.
Talking's one of my favorite things to do.
You're a very good communicator. Is there a particular thing like you really wanted to talk about that you felt like we didn't get to? Is there a particular thing you want to highlight? If not, it's fine.
Oh, no. Well, I guess because it's important to always remember that we are an independent nonprofit.
Yeah.
We are always looking for more members, right? Because members, whether you're an active member and you're doing some stuff with us, you're physically joining us for events or activities or helping to co-teach a program, like we need members in order to be able to continue doing outreach programming and to find funding to bring our students to our centers or to bring our educators to the schools. And that's me talking from an education perspective. But from a conservation perspective too, it allows us to purchase more land so that we can keep it conserved and allow it to thrive from a completely ecological standpoint without human intervention.
Yeah.
We might have human interaction where we carve some trails through so that people can experience it, but we don't want it to change too much because it's already serving a purpose.
Yeah.
So I can't emphasize enough that members and donors are our backbone. And that is our life force, and that allows us to keep doing all of these things that we're doing. And we listen to our members. Our members are amazing. We have the best group of people that have been with us for half a century as well, and are just really committed to assisting. Because sometimes it's hard to do a hands-on element for conservation, but if you help us, we can do it for you. And we can relay what we're doing and make sure that you know that you're a part of it, because we couldn't do it without our members and our donors. And so I think that's important to just kind of wrap up with, because that is the nonprofit spiel. And
Of course.
as much as I'd love to say that magic can make it happen, money does make it happen, and
Money and
that
gorillas.
is money and gorillas and good sparks, right? That spark. We talk about spark birds. What was the first bird you saw that made you a birder?
Right.
We just want to talk about nature sparks. Like, what made you feel excited about the natural world, and how can we make sure that it just keeps sparking that interest all the time?
Yeah. All right. What makes you optimistic about the future of your work?
I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't those bumblebees just showing up after we build this location for them, right? We provide them with food and all of a sudden they're there. It's not like with humans where you have to market and advertise and you got to break your back trying to get people to know these things are available to you. With insects and with most animals in nature, just it happens. It happens on its own. And that makes me really excited for the future, because I figure if at all 4 gardens we've had insects investigating and nectaring within 24 hours, well, imagine what we could do with all the rest of the spaces on the planet if we provide what is needed for the little guys that are running the world.
Put the gardens everywhere.
I know, put the gardens everywhere. That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
I just want the gardens to be everywhere. And the gardens are great for people too, right?
Yeah.
I find as much joy watching these insects as those insects are getting from the nutrition it's providing. And my volunteers and the students are too. I mean, I cannot, it brings me I like go home feeling like I'm walking on a cloud after being at the gardens.
Yeah.
Because people I don't like flowers, I'm not a landscaper, I don't like insects, I'm afraid of wasps.
Right.
They have 20 minutes of interacting with these animals and they're like, oh my gosh, look at. And now I just walk away.
Yeah.
Because they are in it. And I sit there like a proud mama hen and I'm just like ruffling my feathers like, look at this. Look at all this happening.
The spark's been sparked.
The spark has been sparked,
Yeah.
and they are invested. And so if we can do it on small scale, imagine what more of us can do on large scale.
Yeah. Willa, it's been a real joy having you on.
Thanks, Andy. It's been good.
We'll have to have you back someday.
I'd be honored. Let's just not talk about gorillas next time.
No, I know. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.